In the frozen north, nothing is handed to you. You claw for every inch, every dollar, every dream. And Parker Schnabel, he had one of the biggest dreams of all. $40 million worth of gold in one single mining season. That number wasn't just ambitious, it was bold, it was dangerous. He wasn't digging for gold, he was digging into chaos. Everything on that mine site carried weight. Every decision, every delay, every drop of fuel, it all came with a cost. And most of the time, the only goal was simple. Don't get screwed. The season started with hope and high expectations. But early on, cracks began to show. The crew was scrambling not to move forward, but just to stay afloat. Too much manpower was being wasted just to keep the plant running. Parker considered the unthinkable, shutting it all down. And behind that desperation, a single overlooked detail. In mining, timing is everything, especially in the Yukon. The ground here freezes hard. If it's not prepared months in advance, it stays frozen. The layer of overburdened, useless dirt on top of the gold has to be removed early to give the sun time to thaw the ground. Parker had skipped a step. He had a piece of land called the Elbow Cut. He knew it had gold, knew it was the logical next move, but he hadn't prepared for it. Now, in the middle of a racing season, that mistake had frozen their entire operation. The operation was already running at full tilt. Right now, we're just throwing everybody we can at these cuts to get them caught up and ready to go, because like where we're at right now, there's, 12 feet of gravel that needs to fog. Bridge Cut was producing gold. Another area was being carefully prepared for next season. A long-term investment of time, fuel, and manpower. But that entire plan was about to unravel. The moment Parker realized the elbow cut hadn't been properly thawed or stripped, everything else came to a grinding halt. He changed the trajectory of the season by asking to pull every available crew member, every machine, and every ounce of focus and throw it all at the elbow cut. And that decision unleashed chaos. The logistics became overwhelming. Teams had to abandon jobs mid-process. Heavy machinery was suddenly in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tasks that were supposed to happen weeks from now were moved to the top of the list. Communications scrambled, priorities flipped, and the weather wasn't waiting. 2 feet of overburden needed to be stripped fast. Dirt that held zero value, just a barrier between them and potential gold. And beneath that, an icy slab of pay dirt frozen like concrete that wouldn't budge without serious firepower. This wasn't just a hiccup in the schedule. It was a full-blown emergency. The clock was ticking, the window was shrinking, and the crew had to shift from methodical mining to urgent triage. But brute labor alone wouldn't be enough. They needed a solution that could rip through time, something massive, powerful, and unforgiving. Office manager Nona Lovelace uses the 73-ton D10 dozer to rip through the permafrost. Enter the D11 dozer. This wasn't just another tool in Parker's arsenal. It was a monster. One of the largest bulldozers on Earth, built to tear through frozen landscapes with raw mechanical violence. If anything could break through the permafrost layer that stood between them and a shot at saving the season, it was this. But here's the catch. It came at a staggering cost. The D11 burns fuel like a jet engine. Every hour it runs, the operation bleeds money. And it wasn't just about filling the tank. There's the maintenance, the risk. The crew needed to operate it around the clock. Bringing in a second one, it was reckless by most standards. But Parker didn't flinch because the real price wasn't the fuel. It was the lost time, the lost gold, the lost season. This machine was his Hail Mary. The financial pressure was crushing, but the fear of failure even heavier. This was Parker's moment of reckoning. A decision made in the past had put the present in jeopardy. And now the only way out was to double down, to dig deeper, spend more, and hope the ground finally gave up its gold. What came next would either rescue the dream or bury it under frozen silence. When the second D11 fired up, it wasn't just a machine starting. It was a signal. The time for caution was over. This was now a full speed, no margin war against the earth itself. The engines roared. Steel rippers dug into the frozen Yukon ground like claws into ancient armor. This wasn't dirt anymore. It was prehistoric ice, frozen hard and stubborn. There were moments where the D11, for all its muscle, came to a full stop. The permafrost was that thick. You could hear it, grinding, groaning, resisting every inch. The blades would shudder against invisible barriers. You'd think it would break the machine in half before the ice even cracked. And yet, they kept going. The crew was operating at the edge. Long shifts blurred into each other. Cold winds sliced through gear. The sun gave no warmth, just longer hours of visibility to work in misery. It was demoralized, and every tiny failure was a disaster. A ruptured hydraulic hose didn't just stop a dozer. It stalled the entire chain of progress. A jammed ripper meant lost hours, and time on a site like this wasn't just money, it was gold. The pressure wasn't spoken out loud, but it was everywhere. And then, finally, progress. After 3 punishing days, they had carved enough usable ground to begin slewing. Not a victory yet, but a shot. The crew didn't celebrate. Not yet. They moved with careful urgency, hauling pay dirt to the plant with a rhythm that said one thing: don't waste this chance. Big Red, silent until now, rumbled to life. It was the heart of the operation. The machine that could turn months of planning, weeks of backbreaking labor, and days of frozen fury into money, into validation, into the glittering metal they'd come for. The team loaded in the dirt, one scoop, then another. The plant shook as it came alive. Water blasting through, screens shaking, soul boxes running, and then stillness. Not from the machines, but from the people. Every eye was locked on the flowing slurry, watching for signs, those black sands, those subtle yellow specks that meant everything. You could feel the tension. No one spoke. No one blinked. Because if this cut didn't pay out, all of it, the gamble, the stress, the fuel, the time would collapse into failure. And then gold. Their first cleanup from the elbow cut came in at 282.3 ounces. At that moment, nearly $740,000 worth of Yukon treasure sat in their hands. The crew could breathe again. For Parker, it was a sign that despite the mistake, despite the chaos, they had found their way back. This was proof that Parker's vision, however flawed, however rushed, still had the power to deliver. And from that moment on, everything changed. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were winning. That single cleanup from the elbow cut flipped a switch. One that ignited every tired hand, every worn-out back, and every doubt that had been growing for weeks. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The hopeless tension was gone. In its place, raw momentum. For the first time all season, they weren't wondering if there was gold. They had seen it, held it, weighed it, and now they had a target worth chasing with everything they had left. It didn't matter how tired the crew was or how cold the mornings had become. Something had shifted inside each of them because there's a unique kind of adrenaline that only gold brings. A rush of belief that makes men push through exhaustion, through pain, through frozen ground in mechanical misery. And that's exactly what they did. The team became a machine. Trucks moved like clockwork, hauling load after load of pay dirt from the elbow cut to Big Red. Big Red thundered through the days and howled through the nights, processing gold-rich dirt in a cycle that never slowed. Every crew member knew their role, knew what was at stake, and now that they had tasted success, nothing was going to slow them down. What had once felt like desperation was now driving, and for the first time all season, everything was finally clicking. But here's the secret most viewers never see. An operation this big doesn't just need horsepower. It needs harmony. You can have all the machines in the world, all the fuel, all the ground. But if one truck gets a flat tire, if one loader goes down, if Big Red gets clogged, the whole thing collapses like dominoes. This isn't brute strength, it's choreography. Dozers have to keep pace with trucks. Trucks have to stay ahead of the plant. The plant has to run smoothly enough to keep processing while everyone else resets the cycle. It's a constant chain reaction where timing is everything. The chaos of the earlier season had transformed into something rare. Total synchronization. It was loud, it was dirty, but it was beautiful in its own way. And the results spoke for themselves. Their next cleanup blew the first one out of the water. 382.4 ounces in a single week. That's not progress, that's dominance. For Parker and his crew, this was the turning point. The exact moment when the dream started to feel real again, where a season once on the verge of collapse now held the promise of something historic. They weren't just chasing gold anymore. They were closing in on it. The land had finally started to give after weeks of struggle. Frozen pay dirt was thawed. The wash plant was humming. The crew was cinched, machines moving in perfect rhythm. But just when things seemed to fall into place, the Yukon reminded them who was really in charge. The same ground they had just fought to thaw inch by painful inch was beginning to refreeze. The sun, once a quiet ally, started to vanish behind a curtain of clouds, and that wasn't the only threat. Rain clouds gathered on the horizon. A single downpour could flood the mine site, turning it into a thick soup of mud. Everything they'd prepared could get swallowed whole. It was a race now, not against other miners, but against the weather. Parker saw it coming before anyone else. There was no time to waste. He pushed the crew hard, then harder. Not out of recklessness, but out of necessity. Once the ground freezes again, it's over. No second chances, no late season comebacks, no more gold. The door was closing, and Parker knew they had to get through it before it slammed shut for good. By now, the days weren't just getting shorter, they were disappearing. The morning light came late. Nightfall arrived like a thief. Temperatures plunged. Breath fogged in the air. Every surface was cold to the touch. There was no room left for error, no margin for breakdowns or missteps. The cuts that still held the most gold had to be mined now. Every mistake was amplified. A jam machine wasn't just a hassle. It was thousands of dollars left buried. Parker knew what they were up against. He knew what was at stake, and he drilled that urgency into every move they made. And when the final numbers came in, $5,425.04 ounces of gold. Each one gleaming, hard-earned, and real. At over $2,600 an ounce, it added up to a jaw-dropping $14 million. It wasn't a fantasy. They had cold, solid proof that they had pulled off the impossible. This is where the story takes a turn. That $40 million goal. On the surface, it sounds like a single-season fantasy, a monumental finish line to sprint toward in one impossible push. But the reality behind Parker Schnabel's mining empire is more layered, more strategic. That figure wasn't pinned to just one season. It was part of a longer game, an extended plan to mine out a lucrative piece of ground over the course of 2, maybe even 3 years. It wasn't about a single jackpot moment. It was about consistently stacking ounces season after season until they reached that towering number. And in that context, the $14 million they pulled this season wasn't a shortfall. It was a breakthrough. That haul, 5,425.4 ounces, shattered expectations, especially considering the brutal setbacks, the frozen mistakes, the logistical chaos, and the high-stakes risks. The truth is, Parker didn't miss the mark. He realigned the trajectory, recovered from missteps, and carved out a massive chunk of progress in what should have been a ruined season. And while the headlines might focus on whether or not he hit that mythical $40 million, the real victory is what this haul means for the bigger picture. With one season, Parker propelled himself years ahead of where he could have been. And he did it under pressure most wouldn't survive. It was more than a win. It was a comeback etched in gold. But then again, when you mix millions of dollars, high-stakes drama, and television cameras, people start to wonder. With a show as popular as Gold Rush, speculation is inevitable. The audience isn't just watching the mining, they're watching the story. And when the storylines get too perfect, too satisfying, too well-timed, theories begin to bubble beneath the surface. Some of the most persistent whispers revolve around something fans call producer gold. The theory that if a crew gets close, but not quite close enough to hitting their big seasonal target, the producers might step in, not overtly, not in a way that changes the core of the story, but just enough to push the narrative over the finish line. Maybe a few extra ounces, maybe a cleanup that just happens to be filmed later. Maybe a little behind-the-scenes support to give the audience that dramatic, triumphant moment they're hoping for. But when you're trying to satisfy millions of viewers and wrap a season in a neatly edited arc of failure, struggle, and redemption, it's not hard to imagine why the theory sticks. Because what nobody talks about is the quiet pressure of reality TV. The need for climaxes, for hero moments, for that final gold count that gives fans goosebumps. And while no one's ever confirmed it, it shows up in forums. Did that gold really come from the ground that season? Or did it come from the editing room? Nobody knows. But the mystery, that's part of what keeps people watching. Parker Schnabel may lead one of the biggest operations on Gold Rush. But what viewers sometimes forget is this. He doesn't own all the ground he mines. Much of it is leased, and not just from anyone, but from Tony Beats, the Yukon legend himself. On the surface, the deal sounds simple. Parker pays a royalty, a percentage of whatever Goldie digs up back to Tony. A straightforward cut of the treasure. But here's where things start to get murky. Because while the show mentions these royalties in passing, it never dives into the details and fans notice. What are the actual terms of those contracts? Could Parker get a bonus, say a reduced royalty, if he hauls in more than a set amount or worse? Does he get penalized if he falls short of an agreed target? It's a guessing game, and that's exactly where the speculation starts. Then there's the rivalry itself. The Parker-Tony dynamic has always been a highlight of the show. Two titans, two generations, two very different styles. The tension between them has driven seasons of drama. But what if that rivalry isn't exactly what it seems? Some fans believe there's more collaboration behind the scenes than we're led to believe. Maybe their on-screen clashes are played up for entertainment. What if they're both making a fortune off each other? That's the kind of theory that doesn't need proof to live on. It just needs a few unanswered questions. And the Gold Rush has never been short on those. But among all the theories, one stands out as the most provocative. The idea that not all the gold makes it to the camera. It's called the lost gold theory, and it goes something like this. Some of the gold pulled from the ground never gets weighed in front of the cameras. It never becomes part of the big end-of-season reveal. Instead, it's cleaned up quietly, off the record, and sold directly to private buyers. Why would they do that? For one, it keeps cash flowing. Mining is expensive. Fuel, food, parts, payroll. It adds up fast. Selling a few ounces off-screen might be a way to keep the operation moving without every dollar being tied to the drama of the show. But more importantly, it keeps the story.